Hi, I'm Megan from Triumphant and Treasured. Welcome to our TNT YouTube and podcast series. Today we'll be discussing grief, and I have with me Cynthia Mascarenas, author of Widows Are Warriors. Cynthia wrote this book in 2018, and the different chapters are really compilation of her own musings as she navigated grief following her husband's death. And even though this book is directed to widows, the principles in it can apply to anyone who has experienced a prolonged season of grief and can even be insightful for those who are ministering to people who are grieving. So Cynthia, welcome. Is there anything else you would like to add about your book?
Thank you. If you look at the little subtitle below the title, it says, A Walk Through the Wilderness of Widowhood. The reality is, it is a wilderness. It is navigating the unknown. It's not knowing what's lurking around the next corner. And pretty much feels like you're in a deep, dark hole with the walls closing in on you. At other times, it feels like you're constantly living in the realm of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this book's a great resource for pretty much anyone who's dealing with grief after the loss of someone. I have written it from my perspective, which is the perspective of a widow.
Right. Well, for anyone who has experienced grief, I think one of the biggest questions is, will I ever be able to move on? It's very common to feel stuck in your grief, to feel like this is a new permanent state of being. So how would you move beyond grief? How did you personally move beyond grief?
The crucial part of moving beyond grief is first having to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Grief resides in you, and for a period of time, you will choose to reside in your grief because your body doesn't know how to do anything else. You know, you can't expect someone to snap out of it. You can't expect someone to just get over it. And the concept of move on can be confused with moving forward, and they're two different things.
Right.
So I think the reality is once you come to terms with what is going on in your life and the reality of your loss, your grief journey, as painful as it is, has begun and is moving forward and moving in progression as it should, even though you feel stuck, because part of the journey is being stuck for a period of time, for a finite amount of time.
Right. And I think it's important to remember that the grieving process, the progression, will look different for every person. We experienced the same tragedy, although it was a different relationship, your husband, my father. Our grief journeys were vastly different. The stages of denial or trying to kind of distract yourself versus facing it head on, we sort of walked through those stages at different points. And so there really is no set or cookie cutter progression. Right. And it's important to remember that as you're walking with someone in their grief or as you're navigating it yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And the advantage to that is you don't have to feel like you're missing the mark or not meeting expectations, because really nobody gets to set those expectations for you. It's your grief journey, and it'll take you where it chooses to take you.
In your book, you talk a little bit about being stuck in grief and will I laugh again? Is there any kind of physiological cause for this feeling of being stuck?
Yes, absolutely there is. And I think it's so important for people to understand that a grieving person is not just choosing to be sad. Yes, it's been a life-changing traumatic event that results in intense pain and sadness. However, being in that state of sadness is not necessarily something you can just flip in your head. There is a physiological reason as well as a psychological reason. Grief makes you sad because there's a loss associated with it. However, your body depends on something called dopamine to give you the sense of you even being able to enjoy the little pleasures in life. And it's not uncommon at all for those dopamine transmitters, those dopamine receptors to be totally off kilter, because grief really does a number on your brain, your heart, your body, on all of it. It's not just the externals that it affects your finances and everything else and your relationships with friends, but it does totally, this every aspect of your life is taken over by grief. And anhedonia is a condition where you are unable to experience pleasure in life. And everyone around you doesn't see that, because they can see so much of joy and laughter happening around you. They might even see you trying your best to smile and laugh through situations. And you do that because you just have to do that. People get tired of being around someone who's sad all the time.
Sure.
And it's amazing how many people will say like, oh, this is great. You're smiling, you're laughing, then you're doing great. You're doing wonderful. Right. And the reality is you're not.
Right. Well, it's a natural desire to want to almost fake happiness, because when you don't, as it is, grief, loss, it's already isolating.
Yes,
and you face an even more intense isolation when the people around you don't know how to respond. And so it's easier to not say anything or not reach out, because there's this fear of doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. And so your natural disposition will be, let me just pretend like everything's okay, because then I can be included in social events. Then people won't mind having me around.
That's right. That's right. And that is why this book helps people to understand and help others in their lives navigate grief. Because the big factor in all of this is, do you even understand what's going on? Do you understand why a grieving person behaves the way they do? And do you know how to help that grieving person move forward? Oftentimes you have to set boundaries, but your boundaries and your expectations also have to be reasonable. If you have an unreasonable expectation of a grieving person, it's not going to go well. Right. They're either going to shut down or they're going to lash out at you. And that's what people say, we never know what to say to a grieving person. Yes, of course you don't. Not unless you've gone through a similar experience. So read the book, educate yourself, and be equipped to help yourself and the people in your lives who are grieving.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about the physical ailments one experiences when grieving. I know that you personally dealt with shoulder tendon and ligament injuries, and it was purely caused by the stress of intense and prolonged grieving. Can you talk a little bit more about these physical ailments and how one might go about treating them or addressing them?
Yes, I can. Like I said, grief takes over your entire body. It affects your hormone levels. It actually affects the way your muscles and your joints operate. Your body is in a prolonged state of stress. It's expending all this energy dealing with this stress, and it doesn't leave your muscles an opportunity to relax. Secondly is it doesn't give your immune system enough of a fighting chance to actually deal with viral and bacterial attacks. So it's not unusual to get sick a lot.
Sure.
A grieving person's not making it up. If they've never been sick in their lives before, they will feel sick. And it's not imaginary. Their body is fighting under compromised conditions. So, when you go to war and you're fully equipped and you're strong and whatever, you have this strong ability to fight the enemy. But if you're going in with one arm tied behind your back or your legs tied together or what have you, you're not going to have the ability to put up the same fight. And I think grief does that. Grief binds you, grief cripples you, and your body's ability to fight anything. I know that I had low back pain, and my chiropractor was shocked when I said I have never, except for an injury, actually had low back pain. And he said, you're among probably 1% of the population, because 99% of people have suffered low back pain, and a lot of them live with it chronically. And it turned out my SI joint, which is my hip joint, was too lax and loose in just moving, because the muscles around it, everything was just so stressed and tense. And I had to be adjusted several times to be able to get things back in line. And then the low back pain was gone. But was I making it up in my head? No. How did my joint get out of place? It's because something in my body is off kilter. Because the tension, when you're stressed, you're so tight. Everything is so tight. I remember my shoulders, I just could barely move my arms because all these muscles were like a vice. You get headaches, you get migraines. What happens? Everything just operates under a high stress condition, and it messes up your flight or fight response as well.
And it wasn't just tension, you even had a pretty significant tear. You had some significant damage that was preventing you from doing daily tasks, really.
That's right.
So it compounds, you're dealing with this emotional, mental aspect of it, and then it's compounded by the physical.
That's right. That's right. And healing, is so much slower when your body is busy fighting other issues.
Sure.
It can't focus on healing a physiological injury.
So with all of this in mind, what advice would you give to someone who's currently navigating grief? You talk a little bit in chapter 4 about the emotional first aid kit. What are some practical suggestions for daily life? What are things that they should have in their first aid kit, which can aid them in this journey?
Understanding what you're going through is the primary need in someone who's going through grief. You have to understand that there is a place for depression, for sadness, for anxiety, for sleep disturbances, for loss of appetite. There is a place for all of this. They belong in your grief journey. However, as I've said before, grief resides in you. You can't make it your long-term place of residence. You may reside in grief for a period of time, but you've got to find a way to get out. You may find yourself walking back into it from time to time, but unless you have some tools in your kit that you would use to get out of that dark place. So what would those tools look like? It could look like different things for different people, or all of the above.
Right.
So it could be definitely a lot of rest, a good circle of friends, maybe a grief support group, maybe your church, maybe your family, lots of herbs and supplements, physical exercise. I can't overemphasize that, because nothing in you wants to do anything much more than, you want to get out of bed, honestly. And it feels like a colossal task to get out of bed and get clothes on. I used to tell most people, I'm dressed. Don't ask me to do anything more today. I got out of bed. Don't mess with me anymore. Just leave me alone. And yet I would walk. If I couldn't go out, didn't want to go out, I'd just pace in the house, because I knew the physical movement was good for me. Music can be wonderful. Some folks say a little bit of wine doesn't hurt at all. It took me a long time to be able to do that, and it was, it was fine for the moment, but I don't like using alcohol as a crutch in anything. Bathtubs can do. Some just want to go to the gym and exercise. Whatever it is, you've got to figure out what's in your toolkit. I know that my faith journey is what took me there, and really, I couldn't even talk to God. I was, sort of mad at Him, but I knew, I was like, God, I know you've got big shoulders, so deal with me, because I'm really mad at you right now. And, He pretty much said, it's all right. I got you. Go ahead and be mad at me. Sort of like a parent who understands a child lashes out at them when they hurt, So, all of these can be used, because emotional pain is not understood by people. And emotional pain does not get the attention that physical pain does. Psychology today talks about why emotional pain is actually much harder than physical pain, and that's because it's less understood.
Sure.
It's not visible. People can see you grimace under physical pain, You put on a mask and walk through emotional pain. People just see sadness. They don't see it as pain. They see your sadness as a choice. So there are, valid reasons for where you are. However, there's no valid reason for you to stay there long term. It's not good for you, not good for your health.
Sure.
So in my book, we talk about what those, reaching into your emotional toolkit and finding ways to keep pulling out of that dark hole. It's going to pull you right back in at some point, time to time, but the intensity of it decreases over weeks, months, and years, and the frequency of it decreases over a period of time.
Right.
But you have to actively fight.
Sure.
There's no room for complacency. There's no room for just sitting back and letting grief take over.
I think the circle of friends is really key, because in your own strength, everything will feel impossible, and you need that extra layer of accountability. I know it's sort of a parallel, but when I was dealing with a lot of health issues, in my own strength and my own willpower, I could not get off the couch and move around, but I had you who forced me to, and I tearfully followed along, but I was grateful for it. In hindsight, I can look back and say I made the progress I did because I had you in my life, and because you were willing to push me out of what I thought I was capable of doing in that season. And I think it's the same for someone who's grieving. You won't want to get out of bed. You may be facing severe depression, and having people who are just willing to walk alongside you, to physically hoist you out of bed, and just to be there, just to be present. Oftentimes words don't even need to be exchanged, but it's just having that presence there is a comfort and can bring peace and hope.
Yes,
So.
absolutely. Knowing you are not alone. Knowing this, my sister called me every day, every morning for 9 months and said, "Are you out of bed?" And I said, "No, I can't." And she said, "I'll stay on the phone with you. We'll talk for a few minutes, and then you're getting out of bed." And when she'd say, "Okay, now get out of bed," I'd say, "I can't." She'd say, "Okay, stay in bed for another 20 minutes. I'm going to call you back." And then she'd say, "You need to get out of bed." And I was just like, okay, I guess I'll do it. She wouldn't give up, wouldn't let me stay in bed. She would require that she heard the shower, because even if I was not in the shower, it means I'm out of bed. And I walked to the shower and turned it on. And she says, "Now stay out of bed and get showered and then do whatever next." And it's really, that's what it takes. It takes people fighting your battle for you and with you. It takes people praying for you, because I couldn't pray. I didn't even know what to ask God. I'm like, "God, do what you want. I'm at your mercy. You can just do what you want. I'm not asking you anything."
Sure. Yeah.
So I had to have people praying for me and telling me they're praying for me, and messaging me and saying, "I'm praying for you right now." I can't tell you how many times a timely text just helped me in the moment.
Right.
A little sharing of a scripture, or just that I'm praying for you, or just that I'm thinking of you. Not everyone believes in prayer. A lot of people don't. And if you don't, you can still help someone and just let them know, "I'm thinking of you right now.
Right.
Is there something I can do for you?" So you need this body of people. You don't need them all at one time. But if each of them steps up just a little bit, you just need someone is fighting, someone who's in your corner.
Right. And we live in this age of technology, and so there really is no excuse. If you know someone who's going through a season of grieving, this is your opportunity to reach out. It's so easy. Just pick up the phone and send a message, make a phone call. It's interesting you talk about your sister, because the two people who called us on a daily basis don't even live in the U.S.
That's
you have
right.
your sister who was in
She was in India
at the time, and my cousin who was in New Zealand. And both of them called every single day to check on us, to pray with us, to encourage us, just to listen if we wanted to share what was on our hearts, or if we just wanted to cry. And looking at that, I can see the power of that and their influence in our lives as we stepped out of that grief in little steps, week to week. So if you know someone, please take the time to reach out, because you don't realize what a small action what a great difference it can make
That's right.
in that person's life.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Or even when you got the calls from your cousin, she just looked at me and said, Auntie, go get some rest. I'll keep Megan busy.
Yeah.
And that was helpful, that I could just shut down and not worry about whether my kids are doing okay.
Right. Well, everyone, we have touched on only 2 of the 40 chapters in Widows Are Warriors, and so there's much more to come. We hope you will stay tuned. You won't want to miss what we have to discuss next. We will continue this series on grief, and you can also find Widows Are Warriors, A Walk Through the Wilderness of Widowhood on Amazon. I will include a link in the YouTube video description.
Well, thank you for letting me enter your grief journey. I look forward to seeing you at our next video, where we will walk together on this journey through the wilderness of widowhood. Have a great day, and see you the next time.